Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran here. Today's video is going to be the Game Week 24 cheat sheet as we look ahead towards the last game week before double Game Week 25 and a week where still the teams that actually play in double Game Week 25, namely Liverpool and City that actually have the two best fixtures, still have really good fixtures in Game Week 24. So this is actually just an opportunity to sort of reassess the last few weeks, what's been going on, particularly with Liverpool and City, and in my opinion, still make a transfer towards Liverpool and City player because they just have great home fixtures. Everton at home obviously is going to be a tougher fixture, but I think Liverpool have the clear best fixture of the week anyways from any team in the Premier League. So making a move towards a Liverpool player this week is probably the most advisable thing that I could say right now. You could also consider simply going for a Luton Town player too, just because Sheffield United at home is also another amazing fixture. And if you, let's say, are already loaded up on Liverpool or loaded up on City, then you have an opportunity, of course, to sort of expand your pool of players. As far as the midfield this week, we have not too many changes, but we have some sort of additional movements. We've got Barkley and Neto being added to the cheat sheet. Part of the reason why we are adding Barkley and Neto is simply because with Neto and Wolves in particular, I think the most important thing to point out is that everyone's going to have a pretty weak team in terms of Game Week 26, particularly if you're, let's say, invested into some of the top teams like Arsenal, who face Newcastle in a mirror matchup, and then Liverpool blank, Chelsea and Tottenham blank, and City, of course, we're probably all going to own 3 City players anyway. So it's not like you're going to have a competitive edge versus the field. And as such, you're probably looking at, previously a Crystal Palace midfielder, but they're all injured. And so you now need to be looking at a Wolves player, right? Someone like Neto or Hwang, if he comes back in time and is going to be fit and ready to play for Sheffield United at home, are all great picks, even Matheus Cunha. And that's why I think Wolves players are probably the most interesting assets to think about. Particularly also since Game Week 24 is actually a decent opportunity to bring one of their players in. So someone like Neto is interesting. And the same thing goes with someone like Barkley too. Even though actually the double isn't perfect for Game Week 25 from a Luton perspective, Barkley is still a pretty good short-term transfer. I wouldn't necessarily class him as a sort of tier 1 pick, just because when I look at players like Garnacho, Douglas Luiz, and Palmer, even though Palmer has a blank, I think he's basically a season keeper. Douglas Luiz and Garnacho, these are players where they don't really have blanks in the short term and are just amazing picks. Douglas Luiz, of course, we just sort of need to monitor why exactly he was 45 minutes substituted. I think it was just for rest purposes, but that was an interesting sort of thing to look at. As far as the next tier of the midfielders, we don't have any changes there. So Gross was someone that I actually rose last week, and actually I think it was part of me thinking that ultimately Brighton still have really good fixtures. There was no need to really downgrade Gross, and part of that too was also thinking about João Pedro being injured. João Pedro's not injured. I've actually reinserted him back to the cheat sheet. The only reason why he was taken out was because I thought he was injured. And so with Gross, I still think he's a very good pick because we know consistently he is one of the set piece takers of the team. And also with Estupiñán being out and maybe not playing as many minutes as we previously thought, Gross actually gets more access to set pieces, which actually continues to enhance him as a pick. Richarlison, just like Palmer, in my opinion, I wouldn't necessarily say he's a season keeper because I do think there could be various points in the season where Richarlison's minutes do fall, particularly if Son comes back and Werner, for example, is playing particularly well, then maybe it might make sense to actually have Richarlison, lose a little bit more minutes to the players that they have on bench. But right now he's playing exquisitely, and I think it's very hard to argue against Richarlison being a pick that you would keep in your team because when you look at the underlying stats per 90 once again, particularly the expected goals per 90, not just the expected goal involvement, but just the expected goals. Because when we talk about expected goals and expected assists, I mean, the reality is goals just give you more points than assists. And so Richarlison having such extraordinary numbers there, particularly as a centre forward, plus potentially being on penalties as well, shared maybe with Maddison and Son, still makes him an elite pick. And I think I'm still going to keep him ultimately within my team. Ward-Prowse and Gordon, the only change here has been to drop Gordon. Unfortunately, of course, the reason why Gordon was dropped is simply because of his injury, right? There's no other situation there. Ward-Prowse for me still makes sense to pick. You're still invested into a penalty taker. He doesn't blank in Game Week 26. He has an okay fixture in Game Week 26, and that's that. He's not that interesting of a pick to me at this moment in time. As far as the next tier, we don't have any changes either, right? We gave Maddison a rise last week. I've taken Sterling off the cheat sheet, and I've also given Bowen a fall. Part of this, of course, is because I still think that when you look at, for example, the fixtures and you're thinking about who to move into in the midfield position, I think Foden and Diogo Jota are absolutely priorities to move into at this sort of price point. So if you're someone who's owning Bowen, I do think you're just better served moving into Foden, moving into Diogo Jota, and that's pretty much the reality. He doesn't have access to set pieces. He doesn't have access to penalties. His underlying stats are pretty good, so it actually puts him comfortably amongst some of the peers within this category. But as you can tell as well, Some of the other players in this category have some intangibles too, and they're also playing for slightly better defensive teams. So even the knock-on impact of, let's say, clean sheet points, or for example, Madison being on some set pieces, potentially on penalties, Foden, for example, just being an extremely brilliant pick, really, when he actually gets consistent minutes and has a double. Diogo Jota having a double as well. That's more than enough reason to sort of make that short-term move towards Foden and Diogo Jota just for the purpose of really the next 2 to 3 game weeks. And then you can reconsider, for example, moving out of Jota later on and then maybe reconsidering Bowen. But right now, I think that's the landscape. With Saka, I've given him a rise. I do think it was a little bit unjust of me to actually drop him. The underlying stats have still remained brilliant this season, and you can see it here in terms of all the players here who are 90-minute players within the midfield position, having incredible expected goal involvement per 90, of course, recognizing that he's a penalty taker as well. Saka still is an absolute treat in this game, and I really think that as long as he's fit to play versus West Ham away, he continues to be one of the best picks in the game, and there's just really no denying it. With De Bruyne, the fitness that he's actually shown and the fitness that he's actually maybe been entrusted to sort of have with Pep coming back is brilliant. I think definitely he's played more minutes already than I would have already expected, and that already shows you how ready De Bruyne is to play these tough fixtures. And of course, we are heading into a fixture dense period of the season. The reality is he is a little bit older than some of the younger players like Foden, who can technically play week in, week out, or Alvarez, for example. But I still think that De Bruyne's played incredible minutes so far, and if he's playing incredible minutes, he's an incredible asset, and that's why De Bruyne deserves a rise. As far as the forward position moving over there hasn't been really any changes this week, right? I've reinserted João Pedro. I don't think I need to mention that I reinserted him necessarily, but the reality is that we've always kept João Pedro as a top pick within the cheat sheet. The injury was the only thing that sort of took that away. Nothing has changed. Kuna, for example, has already been a green asset. The only player that I've actually made a green asset is Darwin, right? Because part of the reason why we were sort of uncertain about Darwin is that we weren't having that Luton fixture confirmed at home. And now with, of course, Salah still sort of on his road to recovery and Darwin actually getting rested versus Arsenal, I think that the guaranteed start versus Burnley at home makes him a perfect sort of landing spot as a transfer to jump into for game week 24, right? Because if you're looking at, for example, the best forward to bring in for this week and the sort of best forward fixture, maybe with exception to, let's say, Adebayo, technically from a fixture point of view, in terms of the sort of quality of opponents, Darwin really has the best fixture for me for all forwards, taking into account the sort of level of opponent. Of course, Haaland probably, if he's going to play 90 minutes, is going to be better than Darwin. But you understand, of course, how impactful Darwin is considering his price point. And so I think with the double, Darwin is actually a fantastic pick, and he deserves to rise. It's an interesting landscape now with the forwards, because as you can clearly see, I have a lot of players in the top tier list. And part of that is because a lot of us are choosing to spend our funds differently in FPL, right? If you have someone like, if let's say you have a cheap budget, you might actually have gone for Garnacho in the midfield position, and that allows you to go for more expensive forwards, which is totally fine. Your front line could be Watkins, Tony, Haaland, and I think I would advise you to keep that front line. However, if let's say you're keeping players like Solanke and Darwin, I would still encourage you to do so. And the same thing with João Pedro, Cunha, Adebayo. It just really depends on whether you're actually spending more of the money in the midfield. Let's say if you own someone like KDB right now, or a Foden and a Jota as well, or you're choosing actually to spread the funds and actually you have some stronger forwards. And because I think we have so much forward diversity, because so many forwards also have double game week fixtures, or simply are 90-minute players with penalties like João Pedro, like Cunha when Kwang is out, you really are spoiled for choice in the forward position. I think that's why we have so many elite picks, and I think it's totally fine to have 3 out of 3 of these picks who are green. And of course, you can still go away with, let's say, Højlund or Nkunku or Jesus, but of course with Nkunku, I think the issue is the blank simply. And of course with Adebayo, the difference, I suppose, is that you're rocking 8 players really if you're playing Adebayo, right? You've got 5 midfielders who are going to be playing week in, week out. You choose to have Adebayo because he's a bench player, and that's pretty much it. With players like João Pedro and Cunha, I still think that they're at an outrageous price. And as I spoke about previously too, you want these players to actually be playing in Game Week 26, particularly the players that are sort of on the outskirts of your team, who are good budget players who can actually round out your team for Game Week 26. In terms of the defensive position, the key thing here is that I've given Doughty a rise, and part of that, as I said, is if you want to actually invest into a player who actually has, once again, a good fixture in Game Week 24, but also a double Game Week in 25, Doughty is exactly one of those players, right? He's going to be someone who actually has just been incredible in terms of the attacking point of view. He effectively is Porro light, right? Someone who's on a lot of set pieces, has many sort of routes to sort of getting FPL points. Yes, of course, the defense is shocking, which is exactly the same case as Porro, really. But the reality is he has one more fixture than the rest of the field over the next 2 game weeks, and he just has a brilliant fixture here for Sheffield United at home. And it really depends on whether you actually need a forward or rather a defender for this week. And if you need a third defender, then I think Doughty is a very sensible transfer. I've removed Concept from the cheat sheet, unfortunately, because he's injured, which also sort of boosts, to me, the strength of Moreno as a pick. Now, technically, with a Concept injury, I do think that that actually benefits Cash a lot, right? Because technically, they don't actually have a right back right now. So Matty Cash is also a hidden pick, but I'd be interested to see if there are sort of variants of Aston Villa sort of formation at the back that could allow for Cash to get benched. I still don't really trust Cash too much. And I think, of course, when you compare it to, let's say, Moreno, he's not as exciting as a pick just because Moreno, for me, is someone that I trust a lot more from the attacking point of view. Yes, at one point in the season, Cash had brilliant underlying stats. And maybe I'm actually underselling Cash right now because with the Consa injury, I think that sort of makes Cash a very easy transfer to make. And we'll have to see, as I said, how Aston Villa line up without Konsa, who seems to be out for a while. But right now, I've got the faith that Moreno is going to be a good pick. And as I said, the key here with someone like Moreno is just like the Wolves midfielders in Gaming 26, you're looking at a pick who's actually going to be extremely strong in Gaming 26 and has a good fixture. In terms of other picks here, I've given Gusto a fall. I've also taken Cole out of the cheat sheet. In my opinion, this is the best time to move out of your Chelsea defenders, right? First of all, they don't exactly look good on defense. Pochettino is still not sacked. And defense is the major problem with the team, right? When you're watching players like Chilwell and Gusto defend on the fullback positions, I just have no faith whatsoever that they're actually able to manage their one-on-one duels. You can see Neto, for example, just running on the outside of Chilwell. You can see Cunha get the penalty versus Gusto. It is not a team that you're really confident in that can actually continue to get clean sheets, even though, of course, they started the season relatively decently from an expected goals conceded point of view. But I think it's only gotten worse and worse since then. And the big thing, of course, with someone like Gusto is he's still not playing particularly well from the defensive point of view. And so his minutes could be hampered, plus he just has a blank. As far as other drops as well, I've dropped Zinchenko and Porto in the next tier within the defenders. And part of that is because Zinchenko now, of course, I think he is incredible when he actually plays and when you can guarantee him playing over 17 minutes. But Kiwior is still on the sort of precipice here of getting more minutes away from Zinchenko. And I think it's more unlikely, for example, that Kiwior takes minutes away from Gabriel than he takes away minutes from Zinchenko as he has lately. And Tomiyasu coming back just means that both White and Zinchenko's minutes are threatened. So there's really no reason, in my opinion, to sort of take that risk with your Arsenal position and sort of go for the sort of upside chasing value of Zinchenko, particularly when he actually does have a little bit of a downside to him. Even though I recognize, of course, that he's fully within Arsenal's first team 11. And Gabriel and Saliba, I think, just give you enough value, right? Gabriel is an extremely attacking defender. Yes, of course, he might even attack his own goal, jokes aside, but Gabriel is probably still the best defender in the game in terms of value to me. As far as other picks, we have Estupiñán dropping as well. My worry with Estupiñán is that Lamptey coming back and actually being a part of the team, playing really good minutes in the previous match in a game where Brighton actually were pretty dominant, says a lot about Estupiñán's position in the team. We've gone from a start, a brilliant game, to 45 minutes to 10 minutes. And I'm not saying that the next game is going to be 0 minutes, but the concern already is here and set in stone that Lamptey can actually take away the minutes from Estupiñán. And I think that's really concerning for Estupiñán right now. So I do think that he's drastically worsened as a pick, as shocking as that is to me. But we do also have to see, how Lamptey plays, for example, in Gaming 24. If it's the case that Lamptey, for example, or Brighton play horrifically, we could also see Estupiñán stick back into the team. So I would say Estupiñán's dropping because I would not advise people to move into him. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily advise people to just rapidly move out of him unless you're deeply in search of a defender for Gaming 24. As far as other moves here, we have the rise with Virgil. With Trippier, I think the only issue, as I said, is going to be Game Week 26 is going to be a very, very tough fixture. So when we talk about rounding out your teams, creating a really well-rounded squad for Game Week 26, he doesn't really achieve that with Arsenal away. Now, of course, Trippier has actually consistently been close to keeping clean sheets away from Arsenal. And I think in the last 2 games that they've played, they've probably kept clean sheets. Actually, no, I think it was the previous game in the Emirates last season and the game this season at St. James Park. But there was, of course, an Odegaard game or a Xhaka game as well, where Arsenal did step up versus Newcastle. But the reality, of course, we're not expecting for Newcastle to get a clean sheet versus Arsenal. So that is a very tough fixture. And I think that's also what makes Virgil the most appetizing pick in the short term, because I can guarantee his minutes compared to someone like Trent. I would love to give Trent a rise, but I think he's still a little bit away from full fitness. And that's a concern, right? A 58-minute substitution with Klopp basically basically confirming that you're not fit enough to play more than 60 minutes is a concern. When you compare that across the board to someone like KDB or Haaland, who have already come back and played effectively 89, 90-minute games, that is a drastic level in terms of fitness, and we are so close to double Gaming 25. I don't have the full confidence right now in terms of Gaming 24 that Trent would be an amazing transfer. So that's why Trent doesn't get the same rise that Virgil does. As far as the goalkeepers now, the only change that I've actually given here is that Flecken deserves a rise, and ultimately Kaminsky deserves to be sort of added to the cheat sheet. The reason, of course, is simply because of double gaming fixtures. There's no particular reason why I would be recommending Flecken other than the fact that he just has more fixtures than other people. The Flecken fixtures are horrific though, so do you really need to be transferring in Flecken right now? I don't think so. Yes, of course, he pulled in an amazing performance versus Man City, which still ended up with him actually conceding 3 goals to Phil Foden, but still, I would not really recommend Flecken as a transfer in. I just think that, let's say, if you are planning on a transfer and you need a goalkeeper desperately for whatever reason, then Flecken is still a logical pick in the short term, but he's nowhere near, for example, the tier 1 picks for me. And ultimately, after the double gaming 25, his value for me is a little bit depleted. And Kaminsky, of course, similar sort of situation here, where if you need, for example, a keeper desperately for gaming 24 and you need one for gaming 25, I guess he fills in a purpose for you. But ultimately, he's also going to be a blanker. So there's going to be the switch side, I suppose, of Kaminsky as well. And that's pretty much it for the cheat sheet for now, for the Game Week 24 landscape. Hope you guys really enjoyed the video. That's me. A little bit of a quick video, I would say. But as I said, I think because the transfer plans and the decisions are a little bit linear right now, because we have double Game Week 25 coming up and we all need to plan for it, as best as we can. Right now, I think it just makes sense to just pick the Liverpool, the Luton, or the City players wisely. You could obviously go with Tony as well, but that's pretty much the landscape in terms of FPL for Gaming 24. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I thank you to the members of the channel for financially supporting me, and take care, and goodbye.